And now it's time for us to look at the headless CMS option for this particular workshop, which is going to be, of course, Strapi. So as you can see, I am on strapi.io, which is their official webpage, and you can see that they are the leading open source headless CMS, and they are 100% fully customizable. And you can create JavaScript and TypeScript customizations for this. And I, again, highly recommend that you take a look at their documentation, which you can find right here on their website. Now what we're going to do is set up a project. So I'm just going to copy npx create Strapi app at latest, and instead of my project, we're going to call our project just blog. And let's hit enter, and we are now going to be creating our headless CMS using Strapi. Just like with Astro, I'm not going to follow the recommended settings, but instead I will go custom because I would like to show you all these manual settings that you can have. So first of all, I'm going to be using JavaScript again, although if you want to use TypeScript, feel free to go and select that option. Then you have an option to select your database, whether you want to use SQLite, Postgres, and MySQL. Now, personally, I already have a Postgres instance up and running via Docker on my machine, so I'm going to be selecting this particular option. And we're going to create a name for the database, and let's just call this blog as well. The host of the database, it's going to be localhost, that's fine. This is a default port for Postgres, so 5432, that's fine. The username, at least the one that I'm using, is Postgres, and then the password, I need to enter that as well. We don't need an SSL connection, and then now Strapi is hopefully going to create the database for us. So the dependencies have finished installing. CD into the blog folder and then run npm run develop in here. Now in some cases you may be seeing an error here that says error database blog does not exist. Now unfortunately Strapi is not able to create the actual database for you. So before you run npm run develop, you need to go into your database, whether that's Postgres, MySQL, SQLite, and then make sure that you create the database itself. Now, because as I said, I'm running my Postgres inside a Docker instance, I'm just logged into that instance, and I'm going to personally execute a command via PSQL, where the username is Postgres, and then I'm going to run a command, which is going to be via the -c option, and the command is just going to be create database and then the name of the database, which we identified to be blog before. Now that we're done with that, we can now attempt to run the develop command again, and this time around we should be able to build the admin interface. All right, so everything seems to be in order. So what we need to do now is open up our browser and go to this particular address, which is localhost 1337/admin. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is the first time since we're logging into the CMS, so we need to create an account here. So I'm just going to use test.com, and please remember the email and the password combination that you are going to be using, because this is going to be essentially like your master super user for the CMS itself. And let's just click start. And now we are logged in to the Strapi CMS. So we're going to be doing two things within the CMS itself. The first thing is that we are going to be using the content type builder to build how our blog post should look like. And then the second thing that we're going to be doing is we'll also use the so-called dynamic zones in Strapi that will allow us to build an entire page dynamically using content and components that we define in Strapi. All right, so let's go ahead and start putting together our first content type. So you can either click the content type builder here on the left, or just click on this big blue button here that says create your first content type. And so the first content type that we're going to be creating will be the content type to represent the articles that we are going to be storing inside our CMS. So let's click on create new collection type. And I'm going to call this blog. And then click on, actually, before we do that, let's click on advanced settings. And let's make sure that we also click the internationalization checkbox here, because we will be translating the entries into different languages. Now that we've done that, we can click on continue. And this is when we are now allowed to set up how the collection type should look like. And you can see we can pick from quite a few options here. So text, JSON, numbers, dates, password, media, so on and so forth. And for our example, we're going to be using a text, which is going to be just called title. So this is going to be the title of the post. Advanced settings, we could specify default values, make sure that this is required, make sure this is unique. I'm not going to set any of these, but just FYI, the advanced settings tab would pick up the actual type of field that you're using. So in the case of text, these are the settings, but if you pick number, the advanced settings would be different. Then I'm going to add another field, and let's add an actual rich text markdown, which is going to be called content. So this is it right here, rich text markdown, and this one is going to be the content. So this will be the actual content of the blog posts. And then I'm just going to add a couple of more fields, and I'm going to keep on clicking add another field. Let's also add media. This is just going to be called an image, and we can do multiple media. Let's do another text. Let's call this meta title. Let's add another one. Let's call this meta description. And last but not least, let's add a field which is going to be a slug field. Now, how do we add the slug field? The slug field is going to be added by clicking on UID, because this is going to be a unique identifier for the actual fields. And then I'm going to call this a slug. So the slug is essentially going to be using the title as the attached field. So if the title is hello world, the slug is going to become all lowercase hello-world. And that's exactly the type of behavior that I would like the slug to have. Okay, so I think we've added all the required fields. So let's click on finish. And let's just verify. So we have title, content, image, meta title, meta description, and then slug as well. If you miss something or if you want to edit it, you can always click on the edit button here, or click on this add another field to this collection type button right there. Very important to make sure that you hit save on top, which is going to restart the admin interface for us. And then now we have our content type. Excellent. So once you have a content type, you can of course start adding content as well. And the way you add content is by clicking on the content manager on top here. And as you can see, I have blog selected. So we're going to be adding, let me just hide this so we get more screen real estate. So we're going to be adding a new blog post essentially. And I'm just going to start by adding one, and then behind the scenes, I'm going to populate this to add more than one blog title. But essentially notice this button here that says create new entry. So we're going to give it a title, and this one is going to be titled Introduction to Harry Potter. The content, I'm just going to copy that over. Notice that this is written in Markdown. And of course, if I want to add any other Markdown values in here, like an H3, notice how the editor would update that for us. Preview mode would then give us a preview of how the article would look like, which is quite amazing. All right. Then we have image, meta title, meta description, and then of course slug. So let's say meta title, let's just give it Harry Potter, and meta description, Harry Potter, the best wizard. You know, this is going to be some SEO information, but more on that later. And notice the slug is empty, but notice there's this little button in here that says regenerate. So I'm going to click on it, and it basically takes the title and it's going to just slugify that for us. This is quite nice. And then the last thing that we would like to add to this particular article is going to be the image. And if I click on this button here, notice we don't have any images inside our media library. So what I'm going to do is click on add new assets, and that is going to allow me to select multiple files and just add them to Strapi. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And I'm going to select it from my computer. So I'm going to click on browse files and attach a couple of files to here. So I selected a couple of files. These are all AI generated based on the Star Wars universe. So they are not really the actual characters, but they are lookalikes. And I'm just going to upload these 12 assets to the library. We just need to make sure that we select one image, and I'm going to click on finish, and there's one image added to this particular entry. Excellent. So let's hit save. And now we have successfully saved our very first article that we are going to be using inside our application. All right, so a couple of things before we wrap up this part of the workshop. First and foremost, we need to make sure that we enable internationalization inside Strapi itself. And the way we do that is by going into settings, which is this cogwheel icon here, click on internationalization, and this is the place where we can add additional language support for the CMS. And in our case, we're just going to be adding another language. So we're going to click on add new locale. And the locale that we're going to be selecting is going to be simple Spanish, but you can see there's support for all sorts of Spanish languages, Latin American Spanish, so on and so forth. And the display name, that can stay as it is. I believe that's going to be just fine. So we're going to then hit save, and now we have added this new locale. And once we have enabled the internationalization, we can now come back to our blog where we've added the content, and notice now we have a drop down where we can select between the two languages. So we could now list all the articles in English and then all the articles in Spanish. So if I now want to add a Spanish article, I could click on create new entry. However, what we would like to do is actually translate this article into Spanish. So what we need to do is actually click on the article itself so that it opens up. And then also, if you notice, if you scroll down, and this may be on the side for you, I just use a relatively small screen. Notice that we have this internationalization option with locales. And I could now switch from English to Spanish, and notice how it automatically fills up the information. And you could, fill this in from another locale. So I can, if I have multiple locales, I could say, yes, fill the information in from the English locale. And this allows me to then just directly translate this particular blog post. And I've already written that, so I'm just going to update everything here to be in Spanish. Make sure that the image is the correct one. So notice the image code ported over as well. And then the meta description, I'm just going to leave that as English, and just make sure that I regenerate the slug so that it matches the Spanish title. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. And now if I go back to my blog, notice I have an English article and a Spanish article as well. Awesome. So what I'm going to do next is make sure that these particular articles are now exposed publicly. And so any project, for example, an Astro UI, could fetch this information. So every time when you create a post, it is going to be created as a draft, and you have to go into the post and click on publish to make it available, to publish it so that it becomes available. And I would also need to make sure that I do the same for the English article as well. This has been already published. Excellent. So I have 2 articles published. This is step number 1. Step number 2 is I have to come into settings, find the users and permissions plugin, and find roles. And I need to make sure that I find the public role, where I actually will need to find the content type that I've created, and just check find and find one. As you can see, this is going to allow me to execute the HTTP GET statement again /API/blogs and /API/blogs/ID to grab the actual content via REST API calls from the Strapi CMS. And so I also need to make sure that I hit save right here. And then now I can go to localhost 1337 /API/blogs, and then I add populate equals to asterisk to make sure that I populate the data with everything that belongs to the particular blog post. And so now notice we get this response back where I get the actual content as well. I get the meta title, the description, the slug, the locale, I get the image information here as well. And then I also get the localized data right here. And this is of course going to be locale ES. So this is the Spanish version of the article. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now what I'm going to do is just, we just need to populate the articles and then go on to the next section. So please go ahead and add some articles as you see fit, or you can copy paste mine. I'll try to make sure that I give that to you as part of a GitHub repository or something else. Now, the next thing that I would like to talk to you about, going back to the content type builder, is going to be a different content type. And that content type is going to be a page content type. So I'm going to create a new collection type. And this is going to be something that is called a dynamic zone inside Strapi. Okay, so I'm just going to create this particular page collection type. I'm going to hit continue. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. And this one is going to be a dynamic zone. Okay, and then I'm going to add a new dynamic zone field here. And I'm just going to call this the landing page. And then I'm going to add components to the zone. And I'm going to be adding 3 components by selecting create new component. And the first one is going to be the hero component. And I'm going to be adding fields to the component itself. And this is just going to be a new component that we're going to be adding. So create the hero component. And there we go. So the hero component itself is going to have just 2 elements added to it. One is going to be a hero text and a hero description. So I'm just going to add that hero text. And then let's also add hero description. And then I'm going to click on finish. Okay, so this is how the landing page looks like. And I'm also going to be adding a new component, and I'm going to add an about component in here. So I'm going to click on this plus icon, and I'm going to create a new component, and this one is going to be called the about component, like so. And I'm going to add some fields to the component itself as well. And I'm going to add something like an about text. And let's add another field. And this one is going to be a media this time around, where it's going to be called about photo. You don't need to prefix it with the term about. I just like to do it this way. And then this one is going to be single media because we will use it as an avatar. So the point of doing this is that now we're going to create a landing page, and then we're going to populate the hero and the about components within the CMS. And then inside Astro, we are going to be rendering the content of the hero and about components. And the good thing about this is that, and this is why they are called dynamic zones in Strapi, is that as I'm going to be modifying the content, say, of the about component within the CMS itself, then essentially every time when I change its content, that is going to be reflected inside my UI via Astro. So this is going to be really, really amazing. So let's just hit save real quick here and just go into the content manager, and notice that now I have the actual page content. So I can click that and I can create a new entry, and we can add the component to a landing page. And notice here we have the two components that we just created, hero and about. So let's click on the hero component, and I'm just going to copy some text in here. Welcome to the Wizarding World. And then there's going to be a description as well. And then I'm going to add another component in here. And this one is going to be the about component, where I'm going to have an introduction of this person who, came up with this particular website. And I'm also going to just drag an asset here. So I'm just going to use this particular photo, and I'm going to upload this one asset to my library and click finish. So this is, the person who runs this wizarding website. All right, and I'm just going to hit save. And basically what I have now is a landing page which has two components and they have the appropriate text. So at any point in time, I can come in here and change this text. And then regardless of what UI I use, the UI will be able to pick this up. Now, there are some more interesting use cases for this. So for example, imagine that you have a page that is truly made out of blocks, right? Or you maybe have a call to action section, you have a reviews section, you have a newsletter subscription section. And so all of these sections can be managed as dynamic zones within Strapi. And then you can grab the content from Strapi and add it to your UI using any popular front-end framework. So in the last section of this workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we can build a user interface by actually using the components found inside the landing page itself. Furthermore, we will also make sure that we can print the blog posts out inside that application. You already saw the demo, so that's exactly what we're going to do. But before we get to that, one last thing, make sure that you go back to the users and permissions plugin, roles, public, and now that we have this new page content type, you just make sure that you check find and that you hit save as well, because we are going to be using this endpoint /API/pages to access the pages that we have. And I can't remember, let's just verify that we made this. No, we didn't publish them. So let's make sure that we publish this as well. Now, if we go to /API/pages and then populate landing page and then populate equals to asterisk, then now we have the content for the hero component, the about component, and the image itself. So now we have everything to work on our UI, and that's exactly what we're going to do in this third part of this workshop.